I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. How does a brand go from overlooked to unforgettable? Tom Miner knows. As head of global social media at Crocs, he helped drive one of today's biggest brand turnarounds. Now, author of Social First Brands, Tom shares why personality is your secret weapon and how to ride trends that matter and why comments don't equal community. All of that, my interview with Tom, is coming right up. But first, Tom Miner, welcome to On Brand.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I'm excited.
I am thrilled to chat. Whenever Crocs comes up, I always talk about taking my kids to New York for the first time. And, I think of the many number of things that are amazing to see live and in person in New York the first time. My daughter's absolute favorite was the Crocs store. We made multiple visits and she had this figured out like a commando, like how many Crocs she could get back. And I'm like, okay, you can fit another, yeah, I got it all figured out. So it takes a foresight to develop a brand like that. And as mentioned in the bio, really a brand turnaround. At kind of the social media forefront, what do you think led? Because I was an OG Crocs and then was quickly made fun of by the same family that ended up in just a real short turnaround. That same New York trip, they're fighting over their Crocs. What happened?
Well, first of all, apologies to you and millions of other families around the world for ruining trips to New York. As the kid, I was one of the Cody Croc stores. I've heard countless stories very much like that. And what happened was nothing short of magic. It was, I think, also it's a case study that's been studied pretty broadly in the last few years, but being firsthand seat and helping this really happen was pretty exciting. The first thing that really what we did, that kind of first spark, if you will, was this, transformation of who we were talking to. So in this example with your daughter, right? When I first joined the company and was the head of social, like I just jumped right into the platforms. I wanted to see what the conversation was, who was talking about us, and pretty quickly within the first week, noticed a huge discrepancy. So the brand was trying to talk to middle-aged parents, a lot of women around like comfort stories, or maybe wearing the Crocs out into the garden, which is fine, right? It's definitely a use case of Crocs. You can come in and wash them off really quickly. But what was happening behind the scenes was we noticed this kind of groundswell of nostalgia. So a lot of, at the time, like high school and college age kids were nostalgic for Crocs when those came out and were really big in the earlier 2000s. That was their first pair of shoes in many cases. And so we saw that these were really the people who were driving the conversation around the brand, and they weren't being spoken to at all by Crocs. And so obviously since then, the brand now is much more youthful. It is talking to a younger generation. It's become relevant in ways that made the brand cool. So as in your example of being made fun of, which is, that's kind of Crocs, part of their brand lore, to be honest, is that built-in polarity of being an ugly shoe, to today with younger generations really latching onto it as a form of self-identity.
That seems like a really interesting, like you mentioned, kind of the overall case study of it all. But I also think about that last point of the interesting kind of take on brand strategy. If we're going to take this thing that, we're making fun of dad, not that I still have baggage about it, which I obviously do. But taking this thing and making it a part of lore, embracing that, because I could see a lot of brands being almost touchy about that of, hey, don't talk about it. There's this whole thing that people that we don't like to think about. How do you balance all of that in building the brand?
I don't think you balance it. So I'm a big believer in being able to kind of walk that extremes, right? Or polarity, if you will, is typically the word we use in marketing. So if you have those two extremes or those two opposite poles, how can you live with this productive tension? That's the way I view it. So not necessarily balance. I feel like balance sometimes is tough because we try to pull back somewhere. In the case of Crocs, right, and brands that do this really well, they're not worried about balance. They know the hate's there, and they don't need to try to balance that out. It is, hey, we are what we are, and we're full steam ahead, and we can live with this in this productive way. Which, by productive, I mean it gets people talking, right? So, there's one approach to, I think nowadays we see people trying to be controversial, and that's a whole separate tangent, but controversy to me is different than polarity. And Crocs has amazing and built-in polarity because of that existing brand lore, the way the shoe looks, literally a plastic shoe with holes in it, that it has that conversation built in. And so the brand said, hey, instead of fighting this or trying to balance it, let's lean in. We know this is going to happen, and it's going to pull out our supporters and our super fans even more so to become these vocal defenders of Crocs.
There was a term you used in there that, for no other reason, I just want to say it again because I think it's an easy one to miss. And that was this idea of productive tension. So I think a lot of times brands are quick to look for ways to sand out any rough edges. And I don't think we think enough about what could be productive tension. Is there any way in thinking about that if someone's listening and thinking, oh, I wonder if that's what we have a bit of here? Eh, Is there how do you know if tension is productive?
Great question. So to me, I think like part of it is not necessarily seeing your weaknesses, your downsides is a bad thing. So I think most brands or products would have some form of a downside to them, and I think that's most people do. None of us are perfect. And I think that like productivity piece comes from like what would the haters say about you, and whether that's happening today or not, that thought experiment can usually get the juices going. Like all of us are going to have something. Because if you're trying to be everything to everyone, we all know that you're being nothing, right? So we have those things in us that are, hey, this isn't for everyone. And instead of trying to hide that in a closet somewhere, bring that out there into the open, right, into the world, and see what happens, right? So that productivity comes from that kind of little insight that like it's bad to be trying to be everything to everyone. That really is the bigger threat than having some tension in the line. So I think leaning into that again, it takes some self awareness and some maybe some admissions to be comfortable saying that you're not perfect.
Well, I think we say a lot too, kind of what you even just said. We all know the danger of trying to be everything to everyone, but we kind of just nod along. It's like, what does it mean to actually operationalize that value? And I think that's what leads to needing to find some of this productive tension that exists. So I want to talk a bit about your book sitting up on the shelf next to what appear to be some Funko Pops up there. Am I correct in discovering another commonality about the two of us? Because I've got Ted Lasso and Caitlin Clark and some others back there.
I love it. Absolutely. Yeah, we've got some Funko Pops here. I've done some work with them, so that's why they're there. In addition to just being a actual fan of some of the IP back here, I got some George Kittle representing University of Iowa.
Nice.
Christian McCaffrey got Batman back there. You name it. But yeah, that's what you're seeing for sure.
So I could go down the Funko Pop. I think I've actually counted because they're on the shelves around me as well, and that could be unproductive for our conversation because I want to get at this idea of social first brands. I think I know what it means, but tell me what it means and why it matters.
Yeah, great question. So it depends who you ask. You're gonna get different answers to what social first brands really are. The reason why I wrote the book actually was to put, I think, not just my belief, but the belief of others who are maybe trying to push the envelope of that definition. So if you look at like maybe historically, what we meant by like social first was a pretty simplistic meaning of that, which was, hey, we should probably not start pumping out like brochures on the social. It doesn't really work, right? Those should maybe stay on the website, or let's not put a long form YouTube video out on TikTok. Some simple things like that. But really, over the years, what we realized, like, that's kind of no brainer, table stakes stuff. Like, post content is optimized for the platforms on social. So my definition of social first brands are brands that really bake in inherently into their entire marketing organization this nature of getting people talking about them, right? And so right now, sure, a lot of the times that is through social media is kind of the primary outlets and channels for that, but it's transcends social media. It's really baked into being product design in the case of a Crocs shoes, right? Where the product itself is so different that it gets people talking. So it can be a product ethos, it can be a company culture. Really, it's just showing up to where your consumers or where your fans are and giving them more of what they love. In exchange, that, hey, we're not necessarily pushing product on them today, but this is how we're going to get them talking about us, which puts us into that more cultural relevance conversation.
So, when you talk about being culturally relevant as a brand, I think that's where, again, people nod along, but then it's almost like they see a moving expressway, and it's like, I don't know where to merge, and I don't know. We're going to beat this productive horse to death, but I don't know what's going to be a productive trend to jump on for my brand versus some stuff that is a little scary. And do we want to be tethered to that? So again, it makes me think of a driver like learning to merge onto the interstate there and kind of paralyzed. How do you navigate that?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it is going to be just it's fearlessness. And I talk about this in the book too. But to truly be social first, you have to be fearless. There's going to be times where you're going to be entering those waters where you might make a misstep, right? That's kind of inevitable and not necessarily a bad thing. I think what we sometimes forget is that, like, it's better to maybe cause a little ruckus or err into the waters of controversy than to just be bland, generic, blend in and be forgotten. And so I think each brand or brand leader kind of has that decision to make, right? Like, what is our comfort level? And to me, again, just like as a practitioner and the stuff and looking at the best brands today, they're pretty dang fearless, right? They're willing to push the envelope, and they'd rather err on the side of maybe messing up or going a little too far. They can always rein it back versus just being another brand first brand that's talking about their products and how great they are.
On Brand will be right back after this. Now, back to the show. For those watching the video feed of this podcast, during the ad break, you get to see both Tom and I taking a little coffee break. So I think you talked about defining the comfort level, and I think that is key. And when there's misalignment there, I would imagine that's where you have trouble. And I feel like we don't increasingly today. I get the sense that organizations either aren't having conversations about the comfort level, or the only conversation is kind of blanket fear. And I mean, this is where, it's funny. I'm reading the new Brené Brown book on leadership and tough conversations. And I think sometimes, we think, oh, we're just marketers. But I think there's a lot more tough conversations involved in the marketing sphere now than there were before. Uh, what, as you talk about comfort level, how can, as someone that sat in that role, how can you lead that conversation? Because my sense is that it might not necessarily come from above, and it might be the functional marketer leading, managing up, leading that conversation. How do you start that?
Yeah, it's one of the more challenging parts of really being a social first practitioner. So I've been fortunate enough to work at, and then consult with enough brands to kind of see the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to this conversation. And I will say that definitely by far the ones that really excel in this, it is strong leadership at the top, which is very trusting of their teams, right? So, for just to put us into context, at Crocs, for example, I was very fortunate to work with senior leadership in the marketing department that understood this stuff, and they give you a lot of cover to go do these things that a lot of companies are too afraid to do. And I've also been parts of companies, I've consulted with others that they don't have that. It's a lot of fear at the top. It's like, what if we do the wrong thing? And that just quashes creativity. The social team, the marketing team can't do what they do best because they have these handcuffs on. With that being said, too, if you look at some of these examples of the last few years of like unhinged marketing, it's kind of on the rise. A lot of this time happens with brands that have legal departments that maybe don't understand it themselves, but they are open-minded enough to, kind of trust these teams again. So a lot of it comes down to just the basics, the old timeless things of trust, transparency, and listening to your own team.
Oh, the easy stuff.
Exactly.
I kid. I kid. When you talk about like the trend of unhinged marketing, are we talking about things like the Wendy's roasts, like the my personality is edgy, and I don't know where you come down on that. I think it can work for some. I think there's a danger in, you talk a lot about brand personality. And I think sometimes, once again, in lieu of having a conversation about what our brand personality is, many will just grab, oh, hey, they're doing this like unhinged, roast, edgy thing. That equals personality. And that is, um, I think, a dangerous one size fits all to apply. So how do you get at authentic personality versus, you know, unhinged bandwagoning?
Yeah, so it's definitely a trap, I'd say, for brands that don't approach it in a smart way. So let's just maybe run the clock like 5 years, right? And where it's kind of the dawn of like, I mean, Wendy's goes back even further than that,
Right.
but really that's like Duolingo with the on TikTok. Really,
Mm.
is like when the cat kind of came out of the bag with brands all of a sudden like we have to go do this now. And I think when we look back into like those early days, like it was different. And honestly, like yeah, if you just wanted to be unhinged, like I would say it kind of worked. It was effective back then. Nowadays, though, because like all things in marketing, when it starts to work or gets notoriety and people are talking about it, every other brand says, "Hey, we need to be the next Duolingo. We need to be like Wendy's." And I've been in plenty of those rooms where those conversations happen, where there's no thought into how those brands became that, right? And so, if you actually study Wendy's, you study Duolingo, you can see that a lot of this stuff was built on brand lore that existed way before their social personality pieces. So it wasn't like they just created out of thin air. Like, for example, the Duolingo owl coming to kidnap your family if you don't do your lesson, that goes back to their push notifications app in like 2014. So again, these things were existing. Their consumers already saw them that way. It's a lot easier for them to amplify that through an unhinged personality. On the flip side of that, though, if you're a brand today that says, hey, we want to be like this, and we're going to start just doing unhinged things for the sake of it, that's kind of like trying to manufacture controversy where if there's no relevance back to your brand or what you embody, then it's just more noise out there. Sure, you might get some extra eyeballs. Good for you. Is it actually going to lead to the results you want, which is to build brand love and create super fans? I doubt it.
So, speaking of superfans, another provocative idea in your book is the idea of comments versus community. And unbelievably, as I add this up, I've been teaching social media marketing at our alma mater, the University of Iowa, for 13 years. And when it was a new thing, and so, yeah, anytime you think about, oh, it's been X amount of time since Duolingo and Wendy's, and I feel like I've been there through it all. But I also feel like I've been through the different phases too, because there was a period where very much we want comments equal engagement, and engagement is what we want. And you talking about superfans and community, how do we look at this in terms of, actually, there's two words in the title of your book that when it comes to evaluating the efforts, we always get a little squishy on, and one is brand. How do we know if that's good? And comments are countable, the same with socials. So, how do you look at that with community in terms of both what you should be working towards and with an eye towards evaluation?
Yeah. So the community piece to me is I've always had a love hate relationship with that word going back years to when community management kind of first popped on the scene in the
Right.
profession. And I thought it's a fine term for like what we're trying to get at. But I think as the years have gone on, what's happened is brands have started to hide behind that because it's not true community. 9 out of 10 comments we're talking about is you're just practicing common courtesy, right? If you were to walk down the street and you bumped into, I don't know, an employee at Home Depot and you said hello and they said hello back to you, like you would not think much of that. You're not like, wow, like I love Home Depot now because their employees said hello back to me. Like that's just common, like how you should treat people. For some reason on social, we kind of started to think that like that was so innovative and that was like, wow, that person's in our community now. So we waved back to them. So it's not that comments aren't important. It's part of engagement, and there's a lot that can be gleaned from comments. It's such a gold mine. It's part of getting people talking. But again, it's separating that from true community, which community only exists if people are talking amongst each other and to each other. And the brand trying to be there in the middle and say that they have a community is sometimes counterintuitive. It's actually kind of works best if the brand's a little bit removed from it, or if you have a kind of a true community ethos that permeates your entire company, right? So I think of like you and I, if you go see a movie tomorrow with your family and the credits roll, you're just going to leave. You're not going to sit there and talk to everybody else in the theater because that's not your community, right? You're there just to see the content. You weren't there for a larger reason. And so for brands, right, again, 9 out of 10 times, we have to ask ourselves, were they here for the content? Were they here for each other and their love of something that we stand for? And so I think that's the big separation of like engagement, how we know comments, and that term of community management versus true community building, which is creating super fans who are going to go out there and basically be evangelists for your brand because they're that passionate about what you stand for.
I think that that's a really important landscape. And I always think sometimes it can be really handy when talking about social media to look at like offline parallels. And what you said about Home Depot, yeah, a wave, or I mean, I feel like all of the stock video that you see of like smiling cashiers equaling the generic idea of that versus the real thing. So, I know from teaching about social media, from writing books about it, that often there are the fun stories that you might uncover. Is there a favorite brand example in the book that you can't get enough of talking about?
Oh yeah, great question. I mean, there's so many, but the one that I thought was just I stand this brand pretty hard nowadays, but Liquid Death, right? So
Mm,
they're a great example of social first because they built it into the entire fabric of their DNA and why they exist in the first place. And to me, that's like true social first because it starts at the company level. And obviously, their founder comes from a brand agency background. He knew what he's doing with this, and it's the
right.
product, the brand name, all of it's this larger kind of joke essentially that challenges the very same old bottled water industry, which is pretty generic and just a lot of stasis there. And along the way of kind of covering some of their story in the book, I thought their product collaborations were a fantastic example of just fun stuff on social, which also transcends into that IRL kind of like in real life events. And part of what they're doing is they realize, hey, if we kind of position ourselves more like a beer company than a water company, we can have a lot of
Totally.
fun with this. And so it opened up whole new pathways of creativity, storytelling that wouldn't exist for just a bottled
Yeah.
or canned water company. So all of a sudden, they kind of leaned into this like heavy metal ethos. And at one point, they actually partnered with Depends, the maker of the adult diapers, to create what they call the pit diaper. So the whole play on it, the joke was you could be in a mosh pit at a concert and you've been drinking too much Liquid Death and a lot of water, you're very hydrated. You don't want to leave to the bathroom, so you can just go right there in the mosh pit and the diaper, and the mosh pit diaper. So this thing was very silly, right? People can sometimes like, oh, it's a low brow. What is it? I don't get the point of it. Well, what's happening is to their fan base, the people they're trying to speak to, like love that stuff. It makes them fall more in love with Liquid Death because they have a funny personality, a great sense of humor, and they're doing things like bringing things into the mosh pit that is mutual ground. That like, wow, this brand really gets me. And so I thought that was just a really fun example. They have others too. Their collaborations are always on point of how they're kind of bringing these things that are bigger, kind of culturally relevant things, but it's also hyper relevant to their audience, importantly. And so they keep landing. It's just kind of hit after hit.
I love that. Great example. And a perfect segue because I'm going to ask you for another brand now. And that is one, Tom, that has made you smile recently.
Ooh, great question. One that's definitely been a pretty big smile in the last couple of months has been pop sockets, actually. So I think we all think of pop sockets kind of circa 2017, 18 at its
Uh
peak.
huh.
And just like kind of the adhesive, you slap it on your phone. And once you got your next phone case, you never really brought it with you. They've actually had quite a glow up, turns out. Yeah, they have like MagSafe options. They're very high quality. I have one with the wallet version on there, which is kind of cool. It's like all my
Oh,
cards are with
cool.
me. And so I thought like the product made me smile first. And then on social, which is kind of cool too, is they just last week actually had a pretty funny TikTok reaction video with their founder. So I love when brands get to that level of having that much fun where the person who started the company or their CEO, you're not above having a good time on TikTok. And so what happened is one of their customers actually had like lost her phone overboard into the ocean when her like grip came off. She posted this video on TikTok. It was very tongue in cheek. She wasn't like super upset with the brand, but she was kind of feigning it.
Right. Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Just kind of milking it. And then, hey, PopSocket said, let's actually do something with this. And so they did this fun reaction video with their founder on camera, giving her a new iPhone, et cetera. So that like element of surprise and delight, it brings so much positivity. Like you go read the comments of that post, for example, and like it's just people like, wow, it's the coolest thing. This made me smile today. Like people who their lives weren't even directly impacted were able to smile from the content. And so I think brands that can do that and really surprise and delight people in meaningful ways, like we need that now more than ever on social. And I think that's a really cool example of just one brand doing it the right way.
I love that example. And it is the second reminder, too, example that you've provided of the importance of leadership and buy-in and doing big things, reaping big returns. Tom, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Yep. So I really only pretty hard to find. LinkedIn is the best shot. I'm pretty active there, and then goldminermedia.com is a company website, so you can find more about myself and the book there as well.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can always find at onbrandpodcast.com. Tom Miner, thanks for being on brand with us.
Awesome, Nick. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, and go Hawks.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.